and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, the podcast hosted by me, Dan,
And me, Lou.
where we will pick a topic about anything or everything, if that's the right way of saying it, and cast our views on it. Um, we are in week 2 of What If, well, a loosely What If month, because I think, like we found out last week, I'll throw a scenario, but we're going to go off tangents. But it's good to help frame the subject, which I'll get into in a minute. But I think I just need to address to people, we are recording this for England anyway, one of the hottest days so far this year, it feels like,
Yeah,
aren't we?
it's pretty awful. And we don't really deal with heat very well in this country, I don't think. Like train tracks warp and people like basically are passing out in the street. The only positive is that pubs make a fortune. But yeah, we don't deal with
Yeah.
heat very well in this country. I've got a fan on,
Plus,
so I apologise if you just hear a quick in the background of my audio for this video, but I wouldn't be able to do it if we didn't have one.
but yeah, we were saying this to Matt last week, weren't we? That we tend not to cope well. And I was saying to Antonio, I was on his show. I think it went out. When does this go out? Last week. That we get good weather here, so it's not that we don't. It's just unpredictable when. But we'll get into a cycle now where we'll have a week or so of really hot weather. Then we'll have a week of crap weather. Then it'll be a week of mediocre weather, and then it'll build up to another cycle of hot weather. And I think we've got like 2 weeks of this to come, haven't we?
Yeah, it was really weird because we had like a period in, was it early May, late April, where it was burning hot. And then I
Yeah.
actually thought to myself, I was like, oh, it can't get any worse than that. But then I was like, oh, in actual fact, summer's not even finished. So at the minute, I'm actually just looking at it now because we are here for everything, including your weather forecasts. So where I am, it's 28 degrees still,
Yeah, yeah.
which
Which
is
for
actually pretty hot considering it's at the time of recording, it's 8:30 at night. I think that's pretty
yeah.
impressive still. But yeah, I just don't like it. I'd actually much rather be in a snowstorm blizzard than in weather like this, to be honest.
Well, when I were a lad, 28 was like what you'd look for in a nice summer's day, not an evening.
Yeah,
And we're
yeah,
gonna
I
get
agree.
yeah, we're gonna get to I think 34 next week.
Yeah, which is like Hawaii level temperature.
Yeah. Well, I've so the thermostat, the heating thermostat, I just walked past is saying 30 degrees here, which for our American friends I think is 86. So whilst it's not necessarily as hot as it gets in some of those places, we don't have aircon as standard. I mean, we're starting it. It's starting to become used over here now, isn't it? But it's still
Yeah,
not
but
widely. Yeah.
yeah, I actually think that aircon is more so a thing for like office buildings as opposed to like I think I know one person in my life who's got air conditioning installed in their house here.
Yeah. There's a guy a couple of doors down who's got it, and when I've walked around my estate, you see the telltale signs of those big boxes on the
Sitting on the
side of the
outside,
yeah,
yeah. But the
yeah,
thing is, in reality, I know that people will only say, "Oh, well, you only get 2 weeks of hot weather." No, we don't. We actually do get way more than
yeah,
that
yeah,
over the course of the year, and it is just very unpredictable. And here, for whatever reason, it just always feels like sweaty heat. Do you not think? Like heat here is
yeah,
not dry, where it's like, "Oh, you're on a beach, you go for a tan." Like here, you walk outside, and all of a sudden, you've walked 10 minutes, and every single pore in your body has opened, and you feel
yeah,
like you need a shower, like you're
yeah,
getting out
yeah.
of the shower and you don't know if you're drying yourself or you're just wiping away more
You're
sweat.
you're wetter than when you were in the
Yeah,
shower.
yeah, genuinely. Like you get out and then all of a sudden you dry yourself and you think, have I missed a spot? It's like, no, I've just continued to sweat already.
Yeah.
And I feel
Well,
like
that's the
that's the real
thing.
problem.
It's like you said, we do get really good weather here. It's just not predictable. Like you can't say, right, these 2 weeks in August, I'm going to book. We're going to have this barbecue. We're going to book this outdoor party. We're going to go here because the whole of August might be a washout, but
Yeah, yeah,
April
yeah.
could have
Yeah,
been
this is the
beautiful
thing.
every day.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
And it's well awkward as well because in reality, if you're like planning a wedding or something, it's really dangerous planning a wedding in England because even
Yeah,
in like June or July, like tomorrow, I can guarantee we're going to get a rainstorm and it's just going
yeah.
to absolutely piss it down for hours. But yeah, it is true. It's very, very, very unpredictable here.
We're not going to talk about the weather, although we probably could get a whole episode out of that.
Although, should we do something else that's interesting to note that happened today?
What was that?
We had the probably least popular duo play the Wimbledon final today, the men's Wimbledon
Yeah.
final.
Do you know what? I forgot it was even on. I was watching a program, saw it, and then saw who was in the final. I thought, ah,
Like, imagine turning around. I don't know how much Wimbledon tickets are for the final, but imagine going to the final thinking, "Oh, I can't wait. Going to support a tennis player that I really love." Getting there, it's Djokovic and Kyrgios, and then realizing I don't want either of them to win.
Though I think Kyrgios, you're going to get a show. Yeah, I think you'll get your money's worth from him. Whether it's not necessarily in the tennis, but
Yeah, this is the thing. He was actually really quite sweary today. It was
I
hilarious
heard that.
because
Yeah, I
on
heard
the
that.
BBC, I feel like they didn't they didn't know how to deal with it, and they also just didn't know if people could hear it. So they were like half apologising, half acknowledging it, half saying sorry, but they just didn't know what to do. It was brilliant. It was hilarious.
That's why I kind of wanted him to win because I know the BBC wouldn't have known how to handle it. I think.
Yeah, yeah, he would have done his interview, and every other
Yeah.
word would have been shit or something like that. And then you would have turned around, and the BBC would have been like, "Oh, we apologise this, we apologise that." I reckon he's going to get fined for his behaviour today.
Well,
But
what did he say the other day? Sorry, we are going off tangents here. Well, what did he say the other day? Someone were they cheering him or maybe jeering him, and he said, "Look, I don't go to the supermarket and clap the checkout workers, do I?
yeah,
They so
yeah,
shut
it was
up."
just
Yeah,
yeah, it was something like I don't go and boo the supermarket workers when they like
yeah,
don't scan quick enough or something like that. Oh my god, it was
yeah.
brilliant,
At Lidl or
hilarious.
so at Lidl, which you know, oh my word, it's
Although I do have to say, whilst Nick Kyrgios was a controversial character, he has actually just been summoned to court for like assaulting his girlfriend. So at this point, I feel like
oh
he's not even
really?
a yeah. I actually feel like he's a baddie that you actually just can't like now at that point. Which is why with Djokovic's personal like profile in the media recently, and now Kyrgios, it was just a final that was just like. I just prefer it not
Yeah.
to be happening. Could we have just ended the tournament and been like, no, I tell you what, we just don't want either of them to lift this
It's
trophy.
like it's like I said to you in the episode, but it might have been last week. I know it was with Josh from Talking Smack. Let's watch Game of Thrones, but don't watch the last season. So just we could watch Wimbledon up to the semi-finals, and that's our final.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been it. Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%.
Well, I'm a Nadal fan. I've always been a Nadal fan. I like him, and so felt bad for him having to pull out. But anyway, we'll get on to our subject shortly. um,
Yeah, yeah, we
so
will at some point.
I said it was a loosely what if subject, and we'll probably end up coming back to this after. We are going to talk about what if time travel was possible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I've got a couple of ads to do shortly, but time travel, something. I mean, I've always been fascinated by it as a kid. How about you?
Yeah, do you know what it is? It's always like one of those things where you kind of I feel like it's the one it's not even is it scientific? Because I mean, I guess Stephen Hawking never ruled it out
Science.
entirely, did he? So I guess it must be something that's like a scientific like would be considered to be something that's scientific. I just remember being interested because I remember reading about Stephen Hawking's experiment, and he talked about it. And what he did is he had a party, but he sent the invitations out for the party after the event, which meant that if time travel was possible, somebody would have known that the party had happened and therefore would
Yeah.
have turned up, even though it would have been impossible in our timeline for them to have had an invitation. And nobody turned up to the party. So he just said, oh, well, time travel doesn't exist.
Well,
But he didn't
well,
actually rule it out of the realm of possibility. I think in like the last book he wrote, he still said that there's technically like a plausibility that time travel can happen.
technically, time travel. Because the problem is, my brain's going to hurt after. I've already had a headache all day, but once you start getting into the science of things, it makes my brain hurt anyway. So, look, as we've said before, we are not time travel experts. We are not scientists. We're not here to teach things. We're here to talk about it.
Do you know what's brilliant about that is the fact that like you think that we're respectable enough that people listening to this think that we would have a qualification in anything scientific.
Austin View said it, so it must be true. No, so
Yeah.
we time travel is possible. Time travel does happen. It's not the way we think it is. I'll just say that for now.
Okay, right. Okay, I get you. I think I know where you're leading to, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's not so much Back to the Future as moving into the future because we're
Yeah.
technically time traveling now. When we started this, it was 9 minutes ago. We're now here, so we're going to listen to this in a week's time, and we'll be back a week. Anyway, right before we start getting into confusing things and brain hurting scenarios, a couple of ads. Firstly, I want to talk about an app. It's Newsly. So Newsly is an all-in-one audio super app for both iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about trending topics on the web at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice, just like mine. Give us your natural human voice, Lee.
This is my natural human voice.
And I think this is actually for the first time ever on the internet, the entire web becomes listenable all in one place. You can browse articles from topics you choose and start playing them and have them read out to you. So stop scrolling and start listening. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, tech, business, science, Bitcoin, or even the Kardashians. And I think we've probably spoken about the majority of those, except the Kardashians. Newsly will find you the latest articles and read them out to you aloud. And they've also got podcasts as well. You can explore trending podcasts from over 80 countries. Our podcast, Casting Views, is also on there. I've started using it as my default podcast app because they've even got digital radio. Download and use Newsly for free now from www.newsly.me or from the link in our show description. If you use the promo code CASTV, that will also be in the description, you'll get a 1 month free premium subscription to the app. That's Newsly. And now we're going to hear from good friend of the show, Antonio, over at the Cultworthy.
The Cult Worthy Podcast. Your host, Antonio Palacios, will guide you week by week through a bevy of cult favorites, obscure cinema, and hidden gems. Listen to us on your favorite platforms or follow us on thecultworthy.com. The Cult Worthy Podcast.
And we're back. So, Lou, let's get into this time travel. What if it was true?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. It being true is one thing, and then the way in which it operates is another. So I looked at this like topic from the prism of two different things. One, if time travel existed, how would I want it to exist? And two, what things would I love to have seen if I could time travel?
Yeah.
Um, so obviously, there's been a number of films that have depicted time travel, from the Avengers, Back to the Future is going to be your best one, to Hot Tub Time Machine, to
Yes.
to yeah, even Superman, wasn't it, where he used to go round the Earth, but just
Yeah. Oh,
backwards. It used to spin the
yeah.
other way, and then all
Don't
of a
want to talk
sudden,
about that because I don't think that's how time works.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's true though, because at the end of the day, when you go to Australia, for instance, you've travelled around the world, and they're 24 hours ahead of us, and then you go the opposite 24 hours, and it's exactly the time that you left Australia in, but then in England. So maybe Superman did have it right all the way along. And then there was also that program. Did it have James Franco in it? And it was about the assassination of JFK. It was called like something
Oh, I've not seen
66,
it. Yeah, yeah, I've not seen it,
where
but
like he
yes, yeah.
goes into a closet and then comes out, and it's just like a week before the assassination of JFK, and he's got to find a way to stop it.
Well, do you remember?
Again,
Sorry. Do you remember we had one here? I don't know if it made its way to the States, but we had a sitcom here called Good Night, Sweetheart with Nicholas Lyndhurst from Only Fools and Horses, who played Rodney. You may have been a bit too young for that one,
yeah, I think
but
so.
it was basically. I think it was in the 90s, and it was a guy in the modern time. And I can't remember how he did it, but he'd either go through a door or an alleyway, and he'd end up back in the war, 1940s, I think it was. And it was great because it was good fun because you'd see him. He led like a double life. He was quite, if I remember right, he was quite a boring guy, and he didn't like it the marriage he was in. And he would live this life like because he kind of knew what was happening. He'd almost be like a spy back in the war, and it was great. But when you then looked at it, it was like a prime time BBC afternoon comedy, but it was glamorizing infidelity because he was having an affair with this woman back in the 40s as well as having a wife back in the 90s, which was really bizarre.
Ah, but you see, now this is the question: is he really having an affair? Can you really say that? This is the thing, because whilst technically the wife that he had in the 90s, isn't alive when the woman that he's sleeping with in the 40s is alive.
You
So,
try to tell that to your girlfriend. I thought I travelled back in time.
yeah. You know
You
what? I
mean this
actually think,
isn't 1842?
hear thee, I shall swipe left on thee. I actually think I remember this. Was a lot of it set in like a pub then? Did you already say that?
Yeah, yeah, I think it was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't say it, but yeah, it was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that my dad's shown me a couple of episodes of this then. But yeah, I feel like time travel in the way that I would perceive it to be if it was possible would be like, do you know, that super secretive, you can't change anything from history, you have to allow it to play out. So
Yeah.
I feel like time travel, much like Stephen Hawking's experiment, technically he's not ruled it out, which must mean that it exists, which must mean that nobody came to his party because there are rules about how you can use it.
Well, shall I tell you very quickly how it does exist?
Go on then. Is this like
So,
practical and scientific?
no, well, no, it's very simple. I think this may have actually come. I forgot to quote the reference, but I think it comes from like the NASA Kids part of the website, the kids part of the NASA website.
Amazing.
But we found my level. It obviously it starts off that more than 100 years ago, Albert Einstein came up with an idea about how time works, the theory of relativity. In that, he says time and space are linked together. Einstein also said our universe has a speed limit, which nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. So, what does this mean for time travel? Well, according to this theory, the faster you travel, the slower your experience of time.
Right. Okay.
Scientists have done experiments to show this is true. So there was an experiment that used two clocks set to the exact same time. One clock stayed on Earth while the other flew in an airplane going in the same direction that the Earth rotates. After the airplane flew around the world, scientists compared the two clocks. The clock on the fast moving airplane was slightly behind the clock on the ground. So the clock on the airplane was traveling slightly slower in time than 1 second per second. So
Right. Now, can I just ask, did they repeat this experiment, or could it have just been a
do you know
dodgy
what?
clock?
I don't know, but this does remind me of that scene in Back to the Future where they've got the clock. They put the dog in at the start. He
Yeah.
sends the dog to the future. So no, I don't know. I assume they probably have, but yeah. So basically, from another website I've seen, you've got to think of it as we travel 1 second per second. Our perception of time is what 1 second every second. So I think what
Yeah.
they're saying is the faster you travel than 1 second per second, you're actually yeah, like I said, experiencing time slower. So I think that's the current concept of time travel that we've got. It's all about the speed at which you move. So I've been in a car with you, so I'll probably end up in last week if I ever get in a car with you again.
Yeah, yeah, this
Um,
is true. This is true. You actually do get younger when you travel in a
yeah.
vehicle with me.
But yeah, so I kind of just wanted to start off with that. So kind of technically we are time traveling at a second per second. So if you can go faster than that, then you are traveling because it's like they said, if you're looking when you're looking into space, kind of technically you're looking at the past, aren't you? Because the stars and the lights you're seeing are from like stars that have exploded years ago, like hundreds of years ago, etc.
Well, I guess as well, when you think about it, isn't that the issue with like us traveling to Mars? Is that like the people that go and travel to Mars, if they came back after like the 2 year trip, would actually be like 15 years older on Earth, but only
Yeah, I
like
don't know.
4 years older in their time in terms of the way that they've traveled.
Probably,
And
yeah,
that's because you're traveling so quickly that you
yeah.
come back. So you would only spend 4 years traveling if you went there and then back immediately. But everybody on Earth would be like 15 years older, which is really strange because then, like, if we were communicating with people that were traveling to Mars, like, how would the communication work? Because,
Yeah,
like, time,
yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like, we'd be sending a message, which would seem like if you sent one every 6 hours, in their time, it would be every two, wouldn't it? It's
That's the
really
thing. So
strange.
when you start thinking about time travel, just as the normal person like we are, it just starts hurting, doesn't it? Because you start getting into what could or can't happen and then the complications of it. And even when you start, sometimes I'll be watching a film about time travel and my partner's not been watching it and she'll come in and say what's happened. I'm trying to explain what's happened, and then yeah, you just start getting mired because each film, which I know is fiction but tends to have its own rules about time travel as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But sorry, go on. You were saying about kind of how you wanted it to happen.
Yeah, I think that the only way that time travel would be plausible in the world would be for it to be more like a spectator thing, as in like you can travel back in time, but you can only spectate as opposed to make changes. Because I feel like in reality, if time travel did exist, does that mean in the future there's lots of time travelers that are either trying to maintain the terrible things that happened or make terrible things not happen that have happened in the past? And there's like secret like battles between time. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit like Jumper almost. Have you ever seen the film Jumper?
I'm gonna say I think I have, but I've completely
Oh,
forgotten it.
sorry, actually, no, sorry, I'm talking rubbish. It's called Looper. Have you ever seen the film Looper? Got Bruce Willis in it.
I don't think so.
Basically, Looper is about time travel and like assassinations, and then basically you get assassinated because you are a time traveler because you've traveled back in time because they need to close your like cycle of life off, basically, if that makes sense. So
Right.
it's weird. I feel like time travel would be cool if it existed, but only from the prism of being able to spectate. So do you remember? I can't remember when it was. Was it in like the 1930s or 40s? There was that picture of that chap who looked like he was holding a digital camera.
Oh, at the box. No, oh no, no, I'm thinking of the Mike Tyson one. There was a similar one where somebody was saying there was someone at the Mike Tyson fight with an iPhone.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And they were like holding like a phone like you would do nowadays. And I think
Yeah.
if I remember rightly, I don't know if this one was like a particular political rally or like oh yeah, this is
Oh,
it,
yes, I know the one you
1940s.
mean. Yeah,
And he was like dressed in like sunglasses, what looked like almost
yeah,
like a
yeah,
hoodie and a t-shirt. Everybody else is around dressed in suits and like bowler hats. And there's just a guy who just looks particularly out of place. It's
yeah,
really
yeah,
strange, like wearing almost like Matrix style sunglasses. And I feel like that could be a time travel tourist
yeah.
because
Well,
that's how I would like to see it.
I think absolutely, I agree with you. I think if you time travel, you've got to not be able to change anything, and I'll come on to something about that in a second. Could you imagine if you could change something and a lot of people had access to time travel? Because I could be sitting here at my desk, and all of a sudden, you know, somebody could do something and change it, and I might not be here. Then somebody goes back and changes something else, and I am here. Somebody goes changes something, and there could be two of you there. Somebody changes something, I could be in America. You wouldn't. That nothing would be static for long. Everything would be changing all the time because you can't not change something surely when you're going back in time.
Yeah,
Because
that's the thing. So I don't know if maybe it's something that's just used by like governments of the future to turn around and
yeah,
spectate historical events. Because I feel like that
yeah,
wouldn't be something that you could trust everyone with.
yeah, because you know they say, oh, you can't change anything, and definitely don't see yourself. Well, I could bump into someone who was supposed to get a job at a laboratory who would then make a vaccine for something and they didn't because I made him late for his interview or something. Do you know what I mean? So you can't not change history technically. Because I found there are some rules about well, supposedly there are some rules for time traveling I've got.
Amazing.
I found a website on yeah, it's called Discover Magazine rules for well, not 5 rules, but the rules for time travelers. We can't travel through time. We do know enough to say that time travel, if it were possible, certain rules would have to be obeyed. So this was in 2009, so it's quite old. Now, do you want me to go through them now so we can bear them in mind in our examples, or shall I come back to it?
Okay, let's see how plausible we think the rules are. Yeah, go on then.
Okay. So this is remember, they're not saying these are the rules for current time travelers. They're saying if we were able to, you must do this.
Right, okay.
Interestingly, rule 0, not rule 1, there are no paradoxes. So this is one where I had to read it a couple of times. So this is the main overarching rule to which all other rules must be subservient to.
Right.
It's not a statement about physics, it's simply a statement about logic. In the actual world, true paradoxes, events requiring decidable propositions to be simultaneously true and false, do not occur. Anything that looks like it would be a paradox, if it happened, indicates either that it won't happen or our understanding of the laws of nature is incomplete. Whatever laws of nature the builder of fictional worlds decides to abide by, they must not allow for true paradoxes. So,
Could you explain that in layman's terms for us?
if someone could, when they've listened to this episode, that would be great. I think
This is why we're never gonna be able to time travel.
anyone who's got a science podcast, let us join. Let's just say rule 0 is no paradoxes, right?
Right, okay, fine, fine. We can get on board with this.
Right, we get on to slightly easier ones now. So rule number 1, it says traveling into the future is easy. So it says we travel into the future all the time. Oh, this is what I was saying earlier. We travel into the future all the time at a fixed rate, 1 second per second. Stick around and you'll be in the future soon enough. You can even get there faster than usual by decreasing the amount of time you experience in elapsing time with respect to the rest of the world, either by low tech ways like freezing yourself or by taking advantage of the laws of special relativity and zipping around near the speed of light. Remember, we're talking about what is possible according to the laws of physics here, not what is plausible or technologically feasible. It's the coming back that's the hard bit.
Right, okay, I got you.
So, number 1, you can easily travel into the future. Two,
Okay.
traveling into the past is hard, but maybe not impossible. So, if Isaac Newton's absolute space and time had been the correct picture of nature, we could simply say that traveling backwards in time was impossible, and that would be the end of it. But in Einstein's curved space-time universe, things are more flexible. From your own personal subjective point of view, you'll always move forward in time. You're always more forward in time. More technically, you move on a time-like curve through space-time. but the large-scale curvature of space-time caused by gravity could conceivably cause time-like curves to loop back on themselves, such that anyone traveling on such a path would meet themselves in the past. That's what respectable Einstein approved time travel would really be like.
Right. Okay. Okay. Who's written these rules, by the way? Can I just ask?
It's Discover magazine back in 2009.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. We can still get on board with it. Go on then. What's the next one?
Things that travel together age together. So if you travel through time and you bring along with you some clocks or other objects, all those things experience time in exactly the same way that you do.
Oh well, this is
Uh,
explanatory for the point you made about the clock. So that'd be. Do you know what would also be a really cool experiment if you had like a long one? Would be like, for instance, things that like age. Obviously, humans age, but like if you had like food or whatever that went off, and you were traveling through space.
yes, yeah. Black holes are not time machines. So it says, like we've seen in the film, sadly, if you fell into a black hole, it would not spit you out at some other time. It wouldn't spit you out all. It would gobble you up and grow slightly more corpulent in the process. Nice.
Amazing.
Just got to read this bit. But once you get close to the center of the hole, tidal forces would tug at you, gently at first, but eventually tearing you apart. This technical term is spaghettification.
Amazing. Amazing.
These are the couple of things that you've spoken about, right? So if something happened, it happened. It says what people want to do with time machines is go back in the past and change things. You can't. The past has happened and it can't unhappen. You might wonder what's to stop you from jumping in your time machine, finding your high school self and convincing them that they shouldn't go to the senior prom after all, saving you all sorts of humiliation. But if you really did go to the prom, then you can't do that. The thing about that to me is why can't you? It makes it sound like something's going to stop you from interfering with the past. If
Yeah,
do you see
yeah.
what I mean?
But then does that not link to rule one about there not being paradoxes? You're not traveling back in the prism of like getting into a floating machine that teleports you so you can look at your old self in face to face, are you? You're technically always traveling in the same timeline. You're just traveling more slowly than other people.
Well,
Does that make
this is what
sense?
I want to come to. Yeah, this is what I want to come on to when we have a general discussion. I'm just going to do the next one. Yeah, I'm going to miss the last two because they don't seem that great. The last one I'll read. You can't travel back to before the time machine was built. What that's even saying is, if a time machine isn't built to the until the year 3000, then time travel to before that year can't be done. Or if a time machine was invented today, you can't go to a time before that.
Right, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense though in my mind, to be fair.
But so it's pretty pointless. So you're going to make something that you can't really use to at least a week. Really? So kind of those are some of the rules. Now, yeah, the one about it's whether you going to go down the fantasy road of how do you want time travel? Like I would want time travel to take me to bits beyond my timeline and beyond, beyond anyone's timeline. Or do you look at it factually? So why can't I go back in time? I guess it depends on how the time machine is built and how you're going to get back in time. But why can't I go to a point in time before the time machine is built? Because I know that the time machine has to be built, but at that fixed point in the future, the machine is built. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get you a little bit.
And that machine will always be built. Right. So let's make it easy. The year 2000, I build a time machine because I'm like that. And I go back to 1900. That rule says, well, you can't because the time machine didn't exist in 1900. But I know the me in 2000 has built it, which means the me back in 1900 has got access to a time machine. You see what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, yeah, okay, I got you. I've got you. This is well confusing. Do you know that?
It's isn't it? Yeah, if you're still with us at home, yeah. So that's how I always seem to see it. And yeah, why can't you go before your timeline? Because again, the me, I guess the saying, as long as you don't stop the you being born at the right time, but we've said you can't technically change things. So if we're not in danger, I mean, what's going to happen? Are the time police going to come out and stop me changing things? How are things going to stop me from changing
Yeah,
history?
no, I'm being serious. This is what I said. If time travel exists, surely there would be there would be agencies or foreign agencies that would deal with time travel, like an Interpol, but for people that were illegally time traveling.
So I'm
They're
going
turning
back
around, and be
all
like,
over the place.
"No, my nudes got leaked. You can't take me to prison." They're like, "Tough shit."
I'd be like going back to the time and saying, right, no, explain these rules of time travel easier. That's all.
We'll
That's the
we'll
point of
we'll
time.
know when time travel existed because you'll get like 70,000 winners of the lottery all in one year.
Yeah. Yeah, so in my head, I want time travel to be that I could go to any point of time, any point, way into the future, way into the past, and that's what I'm basing like the 4, 5 time zones I want to go to when I get
Yeah,
to you.
I agree. That's what I mean. I think I've always looked at time travel from the perspective of like being able to view like the reason that I'd want to be able to time travel would be likely just to see events or experience a time as opposed to like interfere with time, if that makes sense. Because it's
So
always
what
like
would
that
you like?
age-old question of, oh, if like historical events, is that where you're about to go?
I was going to say, well, where would you like to go if time was no object? Because
Oh,
I've
this
got
is a
like 3
difficult
or
one.
4 I would definitely go to, but then I've got some really random. I would go to loads of things. So for me, I would want to go to all the big sporting events.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. Yeah.
but that's easy. I'd love to go to a World Cup final. I'd love to go to, a couple of the classic boxing matches.
Yeah,
Um,
like a Tyson,
yeah,
Evander Holyfield.
with my iPhone.
Yeah, yeah, with your iPhone, posting on Instagram back 17 years or whatever before it's even invented.
Then I've got 4 or 5 particular periods of time which I would love to see just for myself. So I don't know about you, what your if you could do anything you wanted in time or go anywhere you wanted, sorry.
Yeah, I think that there. Do you know what it is? I think most of mine are like from the modern era, and then I've got a couple that are probably like more ancient. So, if we're talking about ancient stuff first, we'll start with the oldest to the youngest. I would love to have gone back to ancient Egypt to actually see how the pyramids were built.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
I think that's one because that's always been a question that has like baffled historians for years. And they're like, oh, well, technically, it's not physically possible for them to have moved a stone that weighed X amount, or you would need 10,000 people, whatever. I would love to see it just in case it was aliens that did that. I would have liked to have gone back to, do you know, like either old Bible stories? So basically, the time of when Jesus was alive. I was raised in a Catholic school, by the way, but I am an atheist, to be fair. But I would have
Should you
liked to
call
have
them
seen,
stories?
yeah, yeah, this is the thing. I would have just loved to have seen like the real life application of that, if that makes sense. So like the stories must have come from somewhere, but I would love to have just spectated on that period of history and see if it was as it was presented, if that makes sense. Or if
Yeah.
it was, yeah, basically, I know it's difficult because you can't talk about it without being a little bit controversial, I guess. But I would have
Would
loved to have
you
seen that.
I'm gonna throw a random one at you. Would you go back to like when your dad was at school and try hang out with him and see what it was like? Would you want to go back or say like your age now? Because yeah, I guess you're gonna go back, but you can't de-age. You go back to when your dad was your age and hang out. Would you want to do that or see what it was like?
Yeah, I guess that would be quite funny as well because then you just would have no. It'd be a bit like 17 again, where they swap
Oh
bodies.
right, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then like he
yeah.
hangs out with like his son's mates and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that would have been quite cool to be fair. And I feel like you would, but then maybe it would like destroy your perception of them. Do you know what I
Well,
mean? Maybe it's
possibly
like
because and I remember like the stories my dad used to say about him, and I was thinking, oh, I'd kind of love to have been there and seen that. And just think, yeah, can you imagine hanging out with your dad when two of you sort of 24 hitting the pub and stuff?
yeah, and he just didn't know it yet. All of a sudden, he just has a son that looks exactly like his best mate when he was in his 20s.
And do you remember, Lou is a great name.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, I named you after my best mate when we were young. What happened to him? I don't know. Just disappeared one day.
To be fair, though, I'm just thinking about it. Yeah, w- you probably were born only a few years after he was the age you are now.
Yeah,
Thinking
yeah.
about it.
It's true, yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right, yeah.
it would be just before you were born, so it'd be nothing dodgy. You wouldn't bump into yourself, even your baby self.
Yeah, this is true. Could you imagine? I'd be turning around being like, he's going to grow up to be a little shit, he is.
So far, then, you want to go to Egypt and biblical times because you kind of want
Yeah.
to see if the stories are true.
Yeah, basically. I think that's what it is, yeah. I want to see how the Egyptians built pyramids and if it was aliens or not, and if biblical stories are true in the way that they have been written in the Bible, basically, for however many
Okay.
thousands of years, 2,000 years, or 1,500 years, or 1,600 years, whatever it is. There is a period of human history that I just never would go back to. Do you know, like plague time, like Victorian
Oh, you
London
see,
and that sort of
now you've
stuff?
got one
I
of
would just,
mine. You've got one of
oh
mine.
no, no, Chuck. Mind you, with your modern immune system, you'd probably be all right. So I guess you'd be fine. But I feel like I just wouldn't want to risk it.
No, well, I've got. Well, let's go through a couple of my times. So I'll use that one now. So I was looking at more like medieval times, the knights in armor and stuff like that, which is kind of
Okay.
around that. Because I'd love to actually see, because just actually see, like you, the reality of that. And
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, the smell. I mean, when we see these programs like Robin Hood and stuff like that, they make it look so gallant and noble and things like that. But the stench that must have been around that time, because they're emptying the latrines everywhere. I'm thinking, whilst even in like the Victorian times, it's all very, elegant and stuff like that in some places, but the streets must have absolutely reeked.
Yeah,
And
because there
I'm,
was
I'm
like no
just
sewers or anything, was there? So
no.
everything was just like in the streets.
So I'm thinking, yeah, like proper medieval times, days of yore and Robin Hood and Arthur, things like that.
Yeah, see, no, I can't get on board with that because just too much disease, too much poo in the streets. I just don't think that's for me. And also, I feel like battles at that period of time were like the bloodiest they've ever been because it was like
Yeah,
knights, swords, like was it what those big, huge catapult thing, trebuchets or whatever it was that you used back
trebuchets.
then.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But then I guess it could have been quite glamorous in terms of kings and queens and castles and knights and that sort of
Yeah,
thing
but
as
you could
well.
go
So.
back and see if it was all talk. Maybe they didn't actually use them. They built
Yeah,
them and it
yeah,
was like just
yeah,
for show.
yeah. They were. They were just like so difficult to build. They made one and then never just made.
Yeah, like nice trebuchet, Lou. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's a new model, Dan. Yeah.
Oh, actually, sorry, I've got another one which is big.
God. Oh.
Renaissance Italy. Do you know,
Assassin's
like,
Creed 2.
yeah, basically, it's basically the whole
Yeah,
timeline of Assassin's Creed. Only because, like, when you look at like that period of time, like Leonardo da Vinci was actually a mind that was probably 400 or 500 years further advanced than anybody else at the time. And I would have loved to have seen that period of history because you got like modern theories and ways of banking. It was artwork, it was music, it was philosophy. And in reality, it probably would have been a really lovely period of time to have spectated in terms of like significance for history. So I think that would have been quite cool.
yeah. I definitely think so. And like you see still they do it. These like masked balls.
Yeah.
I think that became quite prominent then. That would have been genuine then. I want to use the word genuine, if you know what I mean, because that was their culture at the time rather than now us mimicking and trying to hark back to those days.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's quite cool because, like, the fashion that would have been coming out at the time, and like you said, the mines. I'm going to come on to a similar period of time, but I'm going to come back to it after because I want to go to the earlier ones, and I'm going to do the obvious one. I wasn't going to say it because everyone says it. Do you know what? I probably would want to go back and see a dinosaur. I mean, it'd
yeah,
be cool
yeah, yeah.
just
That
to
is
see it
cool. To be fair, yeah, yeah,
and just see did what's his face get it right in Jurassic Park. Yeah, do they look like that? And have
oh
we
yeah,
have we m- and have our scientists modelled the dinosaurs to look like they are? Because if you go there and you see like a T-Rex, it's quite friendly looking and isn't as fearsome as we've made them out to be.
yeah. This is
I'd want to
true.
see if we got it right.
Apparently, velociraptors were like small dog sized.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's probably a bit of Hollywood artistic license there, isn't there?
Yeah, that's the
But
thing. So I feel like you would have got there and been like, "Oh my god, what's that?" I can hear velociraptors. They come around the corner, and you'd be like, "Well, why is it the size of a chicken? This isn't what Jurassic
who's a
Park's
good
for
little
me."
boy? Who's a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
little
You'd be
boy?
like, "Oh, yes, I got back the velociraptors."
Yeah, I think just to get it out my system, I think I would go back to the dinosaurs. Yeah, I think you have to really, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I feel like that'd be quite cool. Do you know what it is? Is I feel like the spectacle of it because you see like these gigantic hanging fossils or like remnants of like woolly mammoths and stuff in museums, and I feel like in reality you can never actually understand the scale of these animals by just seeing remains. So that would probably be like an actual life-changing experience to see that, I think.
To see,
That's
yeah,
a
like I
really
said,
good
to
one.
see them moving, to see them moving, to see them interacting,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
because yeah, absolutely what you said, you can go and see the skeleton at the skeleton at the museum or a mocked up one, but they're just the really cheap prop that have been made by someone. And you can't see them moving. So yeah, so like I said, I'll do that just to get it out my system to say I've seen the dinosaurs.
You
But
bring a
what I would
dinosaur
then,
back, bring a velociraptor back, and try and pull it off as like a dog. What's that? It's a Spanish bulldog. It's what it
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my word, yeah, yeah.
Why
Get
is your
that joke.
Spanish bulldog eating my cat? I don't know.
Why is it getting taller than the house? Yeah. Another period of time I'd want to go to would be like the Wild West, the frontier times. Because again, I
Yeah,
wouldn't want to be there long because that felt quite deadly then as well. But I want to see the actual reality of it and just to see like the saloons, going to one of the actual saloons.
yeah, that was very much like the stagecoach robber. Like, felt like you could probably be hung for no apparent reason kind of period of the Wild West.
Yeah, and just here, like you bump into someone in a pub and spill their drink, you just buy them another one. There, you'd have to have a duel.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know?
You're just like, right, now we just have to walk 15 paces and shoot at each other until one of us is dead. What an amazing way to settle an argument. I think I'd only want to travel to the Wild West to see if tumbleweed everywhere is actually a thing.
Yeah, yeah. Or if it only appeared if somebody said a bad joke. Yeah,
Yeah, and like when you walk
yeah,
through a bar, does it go do 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 do
yeah.
do?
And did all the bars have like those pianos and they was playing that Plinky Plinky Happy tune? You know the one I mean. It seems to be in every film, in every bar.
It's a bit like Westworld.
Yeah, yeah. And if you went into one that you weren't local to, did they all stop and then just all look at you?
Yeah, like all the music stopped, all of the conversation stopped, and then you got looked at as you quietly stepped through a bar. Yeah, if you're like an out of towner or something.
Yeah, and there'd have to be one table where a group of grizzled men were playing cards. There'd have to be another one where a bloke has got his hat over his eyes, he's leaning back, he's got his feet up on the table, falling asleep, but he's actually watching you from the corner of his eye under his hat.
Yeah, yeah. There'd have to be a guy with a really white beard at the bar, absolutely slammed, but just still continuing to drink.
Yeah, and you'd go to the bar and they would only serve you one drink. I think I don't know, like tequila or whatever it was, and in a little a shot glass, and that was it. That's all you could have. And they
Yeah,
would
yeah.
slide it along the bar to you, and the bar would be empty, but you couldn't go up to him. You'd have to stand at the other end of the bar so he could just slide it down to you. That's how it is in my head. Don't ruin it.
I feel like you'd get back to Wild West times, walk into a bar, and everyone would be like, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" It's like,
Yeah.
"Sir, would you like a drink? You're going to need to come here so I can serve you."
Well, you can have a beer. Yeah. Do you want a J2O?
Yeah. Schlur.
An appletini, please, bartender.
Yeah, turning around and giving you a tequila sunrise.
But also, I want to see if those outfits are real because they look quite uncomfortable. Like the leather boots, and then the shirt, and then the waistcoats, and the heavy trousers, and then belt to put the gun in, and then the hat. It just all seemed really hot.
Yeah, I agree. And sticky is what I would say because everything
Yeah,
was leather or made of like cowhide or something.
yeah,
And I can't
yeah,
imagine that that's a particularly nice material to be in 40-degree heat.
and quite dusty.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, 100%. My skin would have a nightmare.
Yeah, actually, yeah, yeah. So yeah. Point number. Actually, no. In times it'd be three. Yes. So far, yeah, those are my ones: dinosaurs, medieval, and frontier times.
That's quite good as well because we haven't picked the same ones, which is quite strange. And I feel like a lot of
Yeah,
people would give you really diverse ones because I went Renaissance, Egyptian, biblical.
yeah,
So moving on from that then, is there any
yeah.
particular events you would have wanted to have seen or witnessed with your own eyes?
I think the majority of the events are kind of all going to be a little bit probably more morbid, aren't they? I'd love to have gone to like a Rat Pack concert and an Elvis
Okay.
concert. I'm still thinking things like that.
You know what? Separately to doing this podcast, I've actually always said this. I would have loved to have seen with my own eyes the fall of the Berlin Wall. Because in reality, when you look at that in terms of like recent history, I think that that was such a significant moment in terms of European history. Like when you look at like the relationships in Europe, the way that like the world functioned at that point, I think that was such a significant moment. And it was weird because it was an entire nation that had been cut in half for what, like 30 years at that point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I just think that there was so much significance to like European history in that one moment, that one evening. Like, wasn't it the guy from Baywatch
Yes.
was there as well? David
Yes.
Hasselhoff like, had just turned up as like the American superhero to kick down a concrete
Well,
wall.
do you know what was really funny? I watched a program recently. Those like these Channel 5 things like when things go horribly wrong or big celebrities' biggest meltdowns or whatever.
Yeah,
It was yeah, David Hasselhoff, because he was huge in Germany as a singer. That I asked him, he's annoyed about it because I think he thinks he is a catalyst for bringing the wall down.
yeah.
So he's quite annoyed that there's not like a picture of him hanging up in Parliament, I think, over there. Um, but yeah, I was thinking that because yeah, like you said, it is actually, I guess, in living memory, quite a big event. Because I remember, sometimes you relate a lot of things to sport and things. Even in football, you had West Germany were a team, and I think
Yeah,
you had different teams then.
that's the thing. I just think very significant moment. But I've also got one that was technically my time, but I just never would have actually seen it, if that makes sense. The other one would have been the death of Princess Diana, like as in to
Okay,
witness
okay,
it as an adult, because I've seen documentaries and I've seen images, obviously, of millions of people lining the streets. But like even when I talk to it with my parents, even my parents say it's not possible to comprehend how massive the reaction was to
yeah, it
Princess
was
Diana's death.
huge. It was
Yeah.
huge.
And I just think that I've never seen that outpouring ever. And I just don't think, looking at the scenes, it's probably going to be the death of the Queen that would ever provoke that kind of reaction when millions of people take to the streets. But Diana wasn't the Queen. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
She wasn't
yeah.
like directly royalty, if that makes sense. So I feel like that is a real. I just couldn't imagine any not celebrity, because I guess she wasn't, but kind of was at the same time. But I couldn't imagine any public figure, bar the Queen, having any kind of public reaction like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, yeah, you're spot on. There'll be a celebrity or a singer who their fan base will be upset about. But yeah, Diana, literally, it was almost the whole country.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
not a lot, well, a lot of the world, because you got to remember back then. I'm not so sure now, but back then the royal family was loved everywhere. Especially in America,
yeah,
the Charles and Diana wedding was huge over in the States. Now, that's a good one. That's what I was saying about a lot of things would probably be morbid because it's unfortunate that a lot of the shocking events or big moments in history are things like this. Now, I
yeah. It's
think
true.
the thing with Diana was also again how it happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Because when was
Like
it?
the
Was it
circumstances were
97?
shocking. Yeah, 1997. So I would have been very baby at the time.
Yeah, so I actually remember it because it was when was it? It was at the end of August or middle of August, I think. I can't think, or July. I can't remember when it was. Either way, I'd been out with a mate. A mate had come over. We'd gone out. We'd got drunk, and I think we'd seen. I'll have to see if the timeline checks out, but we'd went to see Conspiracy Theory. I think the film with Mel Gibson.
Okay.
Got back and they were saying, "Oh, yeah, Diana's involved in an accident." But the way it was reported at the time, saying she's fine, she's got out the car, she's fine, just minor scratches. And we were saying, "Oh, it's a conspiracy, this and that." Woke up, and then it was like she died, and I was thinking, "Fuck, it was only a few hours ago." They were saying she was fine, and it's because
Yeah,
it was so fast moving the news.
yeah.
Um, and then, like you said, yeah, it was almost like the whole nation in mourning.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I just think that yeah, like it was. I only appreciated it once I'd watched these documentaries that I'd seen on her, and realized in reality how much she was so well loved by the public. And so as a result, it's only then that I realized, wow, you know what? Millions of people taking to London, literally crying in the streets
Yeah,
over
yeah,
someone that they'd never met personally, is actually a crazy thing to probably have witnessed. And even now, looking back on it, is like you look at that and think, does that ever happen again? And also, can I just say, your timeline does check out.
okay, yeah,
Diana, 31st of August, and the conspiracy theory, was that the film that you said?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Released on the 8th of August 97, so it would have been in
Oh, there you
cinemas.
go.
That's
Well,
great
because
memory, that is.
well, because I remember mine and my mate Pete. We've mentioned him a couple of times in the
We
podcast. Pete,
got to get him
yeah,
on.
our birthdays were in August. We both had birthdays similar, so I think we actually went out to celebrate our birthdays later. At the end of the month because we couldn't get together beforehand. So yeah, we went and watched that. We'd had a few, and then like I said, it was just then. It was I remember turning it on, and it was like an image of her face in like almost like a black background, for
Yeah,
the morning thing, and I was just yeah, jaw dropped. But yeah, okay, yeah, I get that. Especially like you said, it's I'm talking on your behalf here, but I think. is it because it's something that's happened in such recent memory or live your almost like your lifetime, but you just weren't there quite
Yeah,
there. You
yeah,
just
that's
missed
what it
out on
is.
it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think for me, it's about seeing things that I feel like. I mean, there's a couple of still earlier ones in reality, but for me, it's like seeing things that I was just shy of properly witnessing. Because I think if you look at celebrity deaths, Michael Jackson's death, I remember well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I remember waking up, going to school in the morning, and remembering and hearing on the radio, oh, they play like a Michael Jackson song, and then it's like Michael Jackson's dead. I was like, Michael Jackson is dead.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, but I remember
yeah.
that one. So I think I would have loved to have traveled in time to see these things as an adult to appreciate the effect, but as somebody who was conscious of witnessing it.
Yeah, yeah. One of the big events I'd like to have seen is or to witness was the shuttle land going to the moon landing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
why
you
I
know
should
what?
say it,
Yeah,
the moon landing.
yeah, yeah,
And for a number of reasons. One, because it's like to this day we haven't repeated that either yet. Just imagine how fantastical that must have been on a TV that was probably the size of you probably get mobile phones, cell phones that have got bigger screens than the TVs back then, you know. So imagine watching on one of those really old but new at the time TVs, seeing man land on the moon
yeah,
and just
yeah.
how amazing that must have been. I think that literally I think would have blown my mind. So I think whilst I can still appreciate it now and I still love everything to do with space, I just think, can you imagine at that time when we humans have broken that boundary and we landed on the moon? I just think that must have almost seemed like make believe at the time.
Yeah, that's the thing because it's a period of time where you think about like the technology that we had, and to everybody, like obviously the space race was ongoing on the time as well. You're like height of like the Cold War and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And in reality, it's true. It would have felt like sci-fi at the time because it
yeah,
was like
yeah.
there is a person on another planet, not flying to another country, flying to an entire another planet, not planet, but you know what I mean. Um, yeah, and it's true. I think that that would have looked like there's no event in reality that's ever come like that since. In terms of like human achievement, what else do you think in reality could even come close? I just don't think there is anything in terms of significance.
Well, this is it. I think we mentioned in one of our episodes, didn't we, that everything just feels like an iteration. There are medical advances, but it's all an iteration of what's come before it. There are technological advances, but it's an iteration on what's come before it. But before that, you just were driving or flying or sailing. Now a group of blokes have gone up to space and landed on the moon,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. Maybe we should do a whole episode on that as well.
So yeah, so I think for me, I'm trying to stick to yeah. For me, I think it's like these monumental kind of events I'd love to have been a part of. This is going to sound funny, so I've said like a Rat Pack gig. I've said to see Elvis. I think I would have loved to have gone to Woodstock.
Woodstock.
Everyone goes on about Woodstock. So it was what the end of the 60s. So it was a huge concert. Where it was basically not that I'd want to partake in that, but it was all about free love, drugs. It was like loads of big acts at the time, and it was just that seemed to be a defining concert, a defining event of that generation.
Right, okay. Well, I'm actually looking at images of it now, and the crowds are absolutely mental.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of not me. That's not my kind of gig as such like that. But but yeah, because basically it was spoken about and it's like, oh, if you remember it, you weren't there kind of thing. It was it just I mean people still talk about that like it's a huge part of history. So that concert must have just meant so much to those people at that time that yeah, can you imagine if you got a ticket to it. Now you look back on it. I wonder what it was like. I want to know that. Did they know it was going to be as huge as it was at the time? Or was it just like buying a ticket to see Oasis at Nebworth or so? I don't know. Or to see Ed Sheeran at the Wembley
Yeah.
Arena, and then like it became huge after.
Or do people's like memories of it make it better than it was? Does that make sense? Because sometimes you see these things in history which are kind of like corrupted because of the people that experienced them and then make them out to be something better than they were.
Yeah, I think this one was slightly different. I think because it was all about, I don't know. I know I'm not gonna get this right, but I think it was about the rebellion. It was about, like I said, the free love, and it was about the free spirit kind of thing, and
Yeah.
it just seemed to be that culmination of that. Yeah, I kind of would love to see the reality of Woodstock. I think.
Yeah, that's quite a cool one as well, to be fair. and looking at the pictures, you would have had an amazing time.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you would have had a rubbish time there.
See, it's terrible because I feel like you've got quite positive ones, and all of mine are kind of a little bit dark and depressing.
That's
Because
fine. That's fine.
a couple of mine were based around things that either could have been like wars or assassinations. So we talked about that program with James Franco. I think, and again, this is only by virtue of the fact to witness it yourself, only because of how significant it was, and that probably would have been the assassination of JFK. Because
Yeah, yeah.
again, number one as well, there are so many issues with that day because, like, technically it was recorded, wasn't it? And there's like one camera angle, but it doesn't capture because no, do you know nowadays when we capture things, it's like you're there because you get 18 different angles of any
Yes,
given
yeah.
thing at any moment. It's all in HD. You've got sound, whereas that was a really historic event at the point where cameras were only really just becoming a thing that were getting into the hands of people. And so as a result, I feel like the potential terror of that event isn't actually reflected well in the footage itself. And I feel like it would be, again, just amazingly significant experience to have witnessed, basically, if that makes sense, just because of its historical significance. All of the things that led into it, all of the conspiracy theories that you watch on, I don't know, Discovery Channel, where they also talk about ancient aliens. And I think, again, that would probably be an event that if I could travel back in time, I would have wanted to have witnessed. I know it's morbid, obviously, but it's just so
No,
significant in my mind.
I get it because even over here as Brits, the JFK assassination is just one of those moments that we've grown up with knowing. Even like you said, even you at
Yeah,
your your generation, you know about it. It's all about. It's still spoken about because it was. Look, right, happy stuff like the stuff I've mentioned. Happy stuff doesn't necessarily register with people. Like you didn't know what Woodstock was.
yeah, yeah.
Shocking, horrible events everybody knows about just by the nature because they are shocking, horrible events. So I don't think it's a bad thing to say you want to witness what the feeling was like at the time because we hear about it all the time, we read about it, and it's those kind of events that do make history, unfortunately, or
Yeah,
will
yeah.
travel to even people like yourself at your age. Because you know what, JFK, what was that, 60? No, it wasn't 63 because he was it 68 or 69?
This is going to be great as well because this is testing your knowledge as well.
Well, he
Bear,
did the speech about the. Hold on. So he did the speech about Man on the Moon. So I'm going to say it was 68 or 69.
it was 63.
Was it 63? Was it? It was
63, he
assassinated.
was assassinated. Wasn't
So
it Richard
when was the moon
Nixon that, no,
landing?
wasn't it Richard Nixon that was the president for the moon landings?
Possibly. I think JFK was talking about wanting to do it. I think
Yeah, because he was
possibly.
the one that gave the speech that said, by the decade being out, we will have achieved landing on the moon. Do you know what I mean? That was that
Is
speech,
that
wasn't it?
Winston Churchill gave that speech, did
Yeah, sorry.
he?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you know what I mean. You get it. Everybody gets it.
Yeah, but okay. Well, even that makes it even more valid. What I'm saying is 63. You were born like over 30 years later, and by the time you're this age now, where we wanted to get you're talking about 50 odd years,
Yeah,
60 odd years later. So yeah, so shocking events, unfortunately, are the ones that stick out in memory and people keep talking about because yeah, nobody ever says where were you when Elvis played this concert? Where were you when Woodstock played? People say, where were you when you heard Elvis died? Where were you when you
yeah,
heard JFK died?
yeah, it's true.
And I think we said it in one of our episodes. For me, that moment was Kurt Cobain when I heard Kurt Cobain died, and we've all gonna have that one because
Yeah,
that's what is relevant to you. I mean, I don't think there's many more events like that. I've got a couple of time periods still to say, but in terms of other events, I think even here the war when say when Churchill gave his speeches, I think it'd probably be interesting to have been around that
yeah.
just to see. I wouldn't have wanted to be around that at the time. No, I'm not saying that, but again, it's kind of what the nation was going through.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, one of the other events, and again, just one of the ones that I would have wanted to have witnessed, would have been the moment that the UK went to war in World War Two. And that's only because it was only what, like 17 or 18 years after the First World War had finished. There was an
Yeah.
entire generation that had experienced the First World War firsthand. And I would have, again, say love to see is ridiculous, but I've always imagined what would it be like if like a nation went to war now and people got drafted and it was a case of like people getting conscripted, I would have loved to have seen what society was actually like, the reaction to that from
Yeah,
just the general population, just to have witnessed it, because I can't
yeah.
imagine the emotion that people must have felt when they heard that news. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think you're not saying, I can't remember the words you used. It's not that you're happy to see it. You kind of want to understand what it felt like at the time,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
again, to us, they are just, as much as we say, oh, it must have been horrible. They are just kind of stories on a book, documentaries on the TV, and it can't really relate to you exactly what it was like at that time.
And do you know what it is as well? Is like, especially from that event, it was Neville Chamberlain, wasn't it? Because he was the one that did appeasement with Adolf Hitler. And there was that speech that he gave over the radio, which was about, oh, if we haven't heard back, this is what would have happened. This country is now at war with Germany. And imagine being at home, like potentially being a mum or a dad to kids, potentially having served in the military,
Mm.
potentially of being abroad, realizing that your son, who was now 18, was going to get dragged to a battlefield just
Oh
like
yeah,
you
yeah,
did. I
yeah,
just can't imagine what that emotion must have been like. And I think that's what it is. Like, I think experiencing events for me, or traveling back in time, would only be to feel emotion of the time, if that makes sense. Because I feel like these historical events aren't, because they're so old as well, and because they weren't captured in the way that we can capture things now, they kind of feel disconnected. But
yeah,
when you
yeah.
look at the context, like an entire nation being dragged into a war, realizing that 18-year-olds plus were all going to get dragged to some random battlefield in Europe, must have been a horrifically terrifying time. And I'm not saying that I want to experience it because, oh, no, terror is an amazing thing to feel, but it's just a very unique thing that I feel like I've been privileged enough to never have to experience, and so have you, to be fair.
If I go back to a period of time I'd want to go to, the 1920s, like the kind of in Britain and America, like kind of like the Prohibition period, the Roaring Twenties they called it. So
Yeah,
it was like coming out of the First World War, and not before, because I think at the end of the 20s, I could be wrong. I think at the end of the 20s, then the Depression starts coming in. But there was a bit of the early and mid 20s where money, and I'm not sure why, but like money was starting to come in, the automobile was starting to come in, technology was starting to come in, the film industry was taking off, and it just felt like a really glitzy. And if you think it was so soon after the First World War, and not too long before the second one, that you had this period of time where it just felt really, what's the word? Not extravagant, maybe not the right word, but you had this period of time where where it just seemed to be advances and
yeah,
people
yeah.
having
Okay, I get what
fun.
you mean. Yeah, yeah. It was almost like a glamorous period of history in the way
Yeah,
that we look at it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah. I
think I'd
kind of
like to
understand
have
that.
seen like Al Capone.
Yeah, that's. Do you know what it is? It's yeah. Again, it's like all negatives, isn't it? It's like I would have loved to have seen the criminality about.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But
yeah, I
again,
guess
that's
it's
what
more of
sticks
like,
in your mind.
yeah, you read about people like, for instance, Al Capone, and you think, oh, a powerful gangster, everybody in his pocket. Like, okay, fair enough. But if you lived in Chicago at the time, what was that actually like? Was there
Yeah,
shootings on between rival gangsters every other day? Was that? Do you know what I mean? It kind of makes you wonder, because you hear, oh, the St. Valentine's Day massacre, and you hear about prohibition, and you hear about all of these things, and you think, but was it like that, or is that just the history books kind of making it?
yeah, yeah,
Because we just don't have any like first-hand proper account in terms of what it looked like there, what it
yeah,
sounded like in that period of time.
yeah. And kind of outside of that, like you, I'd want to go back to recent memory, but be a bit older to appreciate it. So like when first home computer did come out, say, and when the first, I don't know, like when the CD first came out, I want to be a bit older to remember that. When, um, when cell phones first came out, like I said, all this was in my lifetime, but I think I'd want to be a bit older to appreciate it more, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing. I feel like, but maybe it's like a thing of like, at the time you just don't see it as a big thing, and then only realize how significant it was when you get older.
Yeah,
Because maybe
possibly.
that's what it is
Yeah.
as well. Because you have to remember, there were a period. I remember watching a film about computers, and it was like one of these computers where you've got to press 16 keys to get it booted up, and then all you can do is type on it and that sort of thing. And I remember them like cutting back to a studio and being like, "Oh, it's such a ridiculous, unnecessary, expensive thing." And it's like, could you imagine that all these years later, all of a sudden, there's basically one in every home in the
Yeah,
UK? It's
yeah,
just a thing that
yeah.
the world wouldn't exist in the same capacity that it does without computers now. And this is the thing. I think that sometimes you um, look at things and don't appreciate how important they were.
Yeah,
And then it's
yeah,
only like if you
possibly,
wally to go back with the knowledge that potentially you have with hindsight, that then it becomes significant.
possibly. Because I mean, like people these days still moan about load times on games, but I had a game that had 11 floppy disks. 11.
You play like half a level, you
You-
need to put a new fucking floppy disk in.
So was it kind of anything else you had? Because I was going to throw one question at you about time travel.
No, I only had the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's weird as well because a lot of them are American influence as well.
I had that in my mind, and again, it's because to us, what's the word? We kind of grown up on these, and because they're from America, it seems even more mysterious to us because it didn't happen
Yeah.
in our country. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
but there was the whole like communist witch hunts and that sort of thing in America, like McCarthyism at the time, where like basically if you looked at someone wrong or wore the color red, you must have been like a communist spy. Um, and then there's basically the civil rights movement in America. Do you know like the Martin Luther King rallies?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like there's the one in
yeah.
Washington, events like that, because they look like they. It's weird as well because it feels like like not looking from a UK perspective, but it just feels like all of these significant events happened in America, and they were all huge turning points in history, or at least that's the way that we get taught
Well,
about them. At
I
least,
think it's because they didn't happen here that we want to see them because nobody here talks about it, or at least not with the experience or knowledge that
yeah,
someone in
yeah, I
America
think
would
that's what
have.
it is.
Because
Yeah, yeah,
I went, or when I was in the deep south of America, I can't remember, but we went to like an exhibition about this, what you're saying, and it was, I want what's the right word to say? It was definitely emotional because again, we can read the books we've seen here, but then going around the whole place dedicated to telling that story, you do feel like you're immersing yourself in that time.
yeah.
And I think that is, like I said to you, I think not the problem or issue, but is because it didn't happen here. We just don't have the people or the knowledge. Other than, like you said, you're watching a documentary on the BBC or something, rather than being in the place where it is, or the people that were there at the time.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
that's my view. Why I think it's more appealing to us for these American things because
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah. I think that's fair. Yeah.
okay, because I was looking at the time again. I was just going to ask you a question. Would you want to go in the future? Would you want to? If it meant you would also see like what happened either to yourself or humanity, would you want to go?
Um. Okay. So I would go. I would be happy to go into the future on the caveat that I didn't have to experience my personal like me or anything related to me. So for instance, I wouldn't want to know anything about family and
So you
or
want to go like
my health.
200 years in the future?
Yeah,
You wouldn't
yeah.
want,
So I'd want to
yeah,
go so that my gravestone is long gone, like it's not been looked after for 100 years, and I just don't even
yeah,
know where I'm buried. I think
yeah,
that
yeah.
I'd want to be so disassociated from my own timeline because imagine going 20 years into the future and you're just walking down the street. You're like, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go back to where I used to live, and then you walk past a cemetery and like your headstone's there. Like, how did
Yeah,
I die?
yeah.
How did this man die? You're freaking out. There's like there's some bloke going crazy in the street, wondering how the guy who died 5 years. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what it would be for me.
Yeah,
So
well, if
yeah,
you
I'd go
did, you
like thousands of years in the future would be cool.
well, you could look. Go. I want to go 5 years just to see if the podcast is still going. But
We're bigger than Joe. Joe Rogan's coming on us.
yeah, no, no. And that's exactly it. A lot of people say, "Oh, I want to go in the future, see it," but no, because even if it's not about you, that's you're going to see something that's probably quite depressing, even about the future or how humans living. I mean, we're probably all going to be like batteries, like in a matrix. We're probably all going to be isolated in homes. We're not, we don't ever go out because everything is online. You do every, and I'm thinking, is that the kind of future you want? And then you're thinking, well, what if that kind of version of the future, or I've gone to the year 3000, not much has changed, but they live underwater.
I knew it. I literally knew it was coming.
You know, you might go to the year 3000, but that version of the future might happen in the year 2028. You just don't know. So,
Yeah, yeah, this is true. Yeah, yeah.
so I'm like, I don't know why you'd want to go into the future. I get it for the tech and stuff like that, but I think going back in the past is fine because everything has happened. You know everything's happened, and I want to go to experience it or get invested in kind of the feelings at the time. But yeah, the future, keep it a mystery to me. I don't want to know.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. I think that's probably a little bit kind of to do with my reasoning for not wanting to. It just like the future, I think, is a scary thing in and of itself. Like because we've just talked about historically how all the significant events have all been negative ones. Like when you think
Yeah,
about it now, in reality, we've probably lived through one of the most significant ones in COVID.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
we as a generation have experienced a global pandemic, and the only people in reality that experienced the last one are 100 plus years old, the ones that can
yeah,
remember it.
yeah.
Like that's a pretty significant event. And again, it makes me wonder in 50 years' time, will people talk about COVID as like,
Well,
wonder what it was like when they're looking at
it will
videos
be
of us
interesting.
washing Doritos in the sink?
Yeah.
Like looking at people wear bin lids as masks and like
See, talking about time travel, man, that's time traveling right back to this year where people were washing, like sanitizing food and stuff
yeah,
like that.
like people like bleaching their toddlers coming out of school because they were like so worried that they were
Oh
catching
my
COVID.
word, yeah. No, no, you're right. I think it will be because this was a global. It's like not one corner of the world felt like it wasn't touched by this. This was global, and you know this will be felt for years to come, and this will be one of those teachable teaching moments. I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. And it's again, do you know what it is? It kind of harkens back to that point, doesn't it? Like to us, COVID has been an experience that we've lived and has felt like it's been obviously it was a scary point of time for a period. But do we appreciate how significant it's been in human history because we're living it now? And I think the answer to that question is no. Only when like you look at 3 generations from us will like the older people who will be me and you
Oh,
potentially depending on how soon or how late we're
yeah,
talking about.
no, no. COVID is the perfect example actually, because now I'm not going to say we're out of it, but you know, at the moment, especially over here, it almost is kind of back to normal, isn't it? In how, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
everything's open. But put yourself back to March 2020 and how at the time how frightening it seemed, or how it was being reported, how you know going into lockdown, how
yeah,
restricted everything was. We've forgotten that already. And
yeah,
so people now and almost like any kids now or younger people growing up won't remember that bit, and we've already kind of forgotten it. So it's like
yeah, yeah,
what I'm trying to say now is in in 20 years people will say, "Oh yeah, yeah, it was bad, but you know, well now you can still go out." But if you could then time travel, if somebody could time travel to say March of 2020, and it was a totally different story then. Do
yeah,
you feel
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So I think this is this is actually a really good example of what we're saying about going back to something bad, because we're reading about it in books, but seeing how upset people were and how difficult it was to go from, yeah, tonight we're going to go out, we'll go to London, we'll go to this club, then we'll catch a show tomorrow, this to basically only being allowed to go for a walk once a day for an
yeah,
hour.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? And you'll never get that experience unless you've kind of in and around it, I think.
Yeah, it's like for me, I still look back and think to myself, do you remember when the Prime Minister gave the speech, which was, at this point, you may only leave your home for the following reasons? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
people were glued to their televisions that night because it was actually a really scary period of time. Like,
yeah,
for the
yeah.
first time in your life, you were being told, you cannot do these things. You cannot live normal life because this situation is so serious that do you know what I mean? To keep you safe, this is what's going to be required. It was, yeah, it was a freaky period.
You couldn't even drive in theory. You weren't supposed to drive to the next town over, even
Yeah,
just to get some go for a drive. You weren't supposed to do that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and I remember I think I remember sending it to you with my cousin in Italy at the time, because that's where it hit bad, seeing videos of the police driving at like 6 p.m. blocking the roads because they didn't want people to leave towns and stuff like that.
yeah,
And it's
yeah, Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I think this sums it up. Why to say to you that I don't think it's morbid to want to go see or experience bad things. I think you can't know what it was like
Yeah.
fully unless you're in and around it, which is,
Yeah.
I think,
That's what it
probably where you're
is.
coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's what it is. It's just it's the experience of what the emotion must have been like at the time. And I think that's what we miss, basically.
All right, cool. So yeah, so time travel, if it can be done in a hot tub, that would be cool. Or a DeLorean. I don't
Yeah,
want it to
or a
be some,
DeLorean, yeah.
yeah, I don't want it to be some nano chamber or something with probes and things stuck all over you. Yeah, a hot tub
Well, this is the
or
thing.
a
If you went in a DeLorean, you'd got to be careful when you went because you can't go back to ancient Egypt, and then you're fucked if you can't get it started to come back. Like, what spare parts am I going to use? I'm going to get Fred Flintstone to come and run me to 80 miles an
yeah,
hour.
they built the pyramids. They built the
Yeah, mind you,
pyramids.
this is true. They probably had faster running like carts that were aerodynamic or whatever at the time, didn't they? They were well advanced.
It reminds me, actually, before we go, it reminds me. There's a guy I used to listen to on the radio. His view was, and I'm sure it's a little tongue in cheek, but he said he actually believed it was that we are a race that came from Mars. We had to leave Mars, so that's why there's these weird things around the planet because we initially bought our tech that's got lost from over time. Now, somebody then laughed at that and said, "Yeah, why don't we have the technology now?" And it's like somebody would say, "Well, give a cassette tape to a kid now and ask them what that is," and they wouldn't know.
Yeah, yeah,
Give them
yeah.
a dial telephone and ask them what that is and how to use it, and they wouldn't know how to call anyone up. So yeah, anyway, sorry, diversion there. So was there anything else on time travel?
No, I think that's it. I think that it's a really cool prospect. I think that, do you know what it is as well? There's so many things that you could have talked about, and I think that we stayed pretty relevant with the topics and things that we would have experienced, and that's what it is. I think with time travel with me, I feel like, do you know when it comes to like personal, like if you could go back in history and change something about your life, I don't think I'd want to do that because I think that that's what your like
It's
life
got you to where
cycle is
you are.
supposed to, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it's supposed to be. Like, you would inherently be a different person now if you'd done something differently in your life previously, so there shouldn't be a reason for you to want to change anything, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Oh
you
yeah,
have
there's
regrets, you live with them, like that's what it is,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, but that's your learning, right?
Yeah. My
Supposedly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe apart from like noting to myself, walking past myself in the street, like in 10 years ago, and being like, Bitcoin hits £45,000. then and then I remember it when I'm like 14 years old. I'm just like, must buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, go back to that version of me saying, Bitcoin, that'll never last. Give him a slap in the face.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you just walk up to your old self, absolutely like right hook him to the jaw, and then he's like, "What's that for?" You'd be like, "You'll find out."
tell the even younger version of me not to take the evil Knievel toy out the pack.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Buy a load of Pokemon cards and just never open them.
Yeah. Oh, and if the younger version of myself could keep hold of the Commodore 64 and all the games I had, because seriously, people pay a fortune to play those now. Um,
Yeah, it is true. Could you imagine if you had an unboxed one? My God, I told you that time about those 2006 World Cup cards that I threw away as well.
yes, so yeah.
Yeah,
Oh man,
yeah,
yeah.
threw away hundreds and hundreds of pounds now. Unbelievable, terrible, old me. What a knobhead.
All right. Well, look, let's start wrapping up there. I'll let you close out, but before we do, if you like what you've heard, give us a rating, please. You can get in touch with us. Where can I get in touch with us, Lee?
They can get in touch with us at Casting Views on Twitter or at castingviewspod@gmail.com.
You
Yeah,
can, and yeah,
yeah.
get in touch. Say hi. Give us a
And
subject.
yeah, also suggest to us what timeline you would have travelled in.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
could tweet at us and say, "I would have loved to experience this," or "Unlike you two depressing bastards, I would have liked to have enjoyed something about history,"
Hold
do
on.
let us know.
Just remember, I wanted to go to Woodstock and Elvis, all right,
Yeah, this
and
is
see
true.
the
Yeah, yeah.
moon
I'm
landing.
like
So, yeah,
assassination,
yeah.
war.
I'm like every week, right? When we do this subject, think about where Lou's gonna go. Let me do the happy side. Yeah, yeah,
We're like the ultimate good cop, bad cop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Next week's episode, all being well, we are going to have, obviously, we're going to have another What If episode, but we are going to be joined by super familiar with the Wilsons, which that could go anywhere. So that will be a loosely themed what if. And before we go, right, did you know competitive art used to be an Olympic sport between 1912 and 1948?
How the fuck did you judge that?
Yeah, the international sporting events awarded medals for music, painting, sculpture, and architecture. Just going to say that it was Olympic sport. Yeah, I'd still finish. I still wouldn't even qualify. I still wouldn't
Yeah,
even get
I
there.
still don't understand. I
It's
just
like,
don't get. I just don't know how you get like
it's
architecture. What do you do? Like,
there's an event in the Olympics that doesn't need speed, it doesn't need physical prowess, it doesn't need muscle, and I still wouldn't qualify for it. So
yeah, this
you
is what it is.
it's like, anyway, do you want to close us out, Luke?
Well, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Again, do tweet us your suggestions for what you would have loved to have experienced through history, whether they be depressing like me or fun and lively like Dan. And before we see you next week, I'll obviously sign out with we know there are many podcasts from which you can choose, so we thank you for listening to Cast in Views.